All right, welcome back everyone. So in the last part, we modeled our planet and we sculpted in a little bit of mountainous area as well. Next, I want to show you how you can easily add objects onto this using Maya's Mesh feature. So that'll be the procedural generation toolset for motion graphics, visual effects, and in our case, set dressing a low poly planet. All right, let's open up our outliner as well as the channel box. And if you take a look at the planet, you can see we have a bit of construction history. So I'm just going to delete my history and make sure the transformations are frozen as well. Let's rename this. I'm going to call it planet underscore mesh. It doesn't really matter, but you may notice that we did name our planet at a certain point. However, whenever you separate and combine a mesh again, it loses the name. So that's what happened. Now, if you take a look at my planet, you can see that I'm using 3 materials, which isn't too bad. It allows me to easily change the colors for my renders, and I prefer to keep the workflow as non-destructive as possible usually, because something like this, if I take it into the game, I can easily change the colors, test the lighting, and then when I'm happy, I can, if I choose to, UV unwrap it under one material. So keep that in mind, but really it depends on the viewing distance and your own application for it. All right. I'm actually going to change some of these colors right now to make the planet look a little more alien. You can do this as well if you like. Open up the attribute editor. We're going to locate the color inputs, and the green color over here is Lambert 2 for me. And I'm going to make it a purplish red color. Right, I think that works. I'll probably tweak it more later, but for now I just want to adjust it a little bit. And the continent crust color, just going to change this as well. And the water as well, just a little bit. Okay, there we go. Now here's our planet, and to use Mesh, what we're going to need to do is make sure that it's enabled. So go up to your Windows tab, go down to Settings and Preferences, and then Plugin Manager. These will be where your plugins are located. And what we'll need to do is scroll down, and we're looking for something called Mesh.mll. Here it is over here. I've already loaded mine, and if yours isn't, you'll need to check these boxes, and then you can close this window. After that, you'll have access to the Mesh Toolkit, and you can find it on your Mesh shelf over here, or under the effects workflow. So here's the effects workflow, and up here you'll have a Mesh tab. I'm just going to change this back to the modeling workflow. All right, now let's add some objects onto our planet. I provided a link to an FBX file. It should be down below, and it contains some low poly props that we made on this channel. So if you want to check out how we made those, I'll also post the link for those. I've imported the planet props already into my scene. I'm going to expand this group. So here are the objects. They're just hidden right now. And I want to take you through how I set these up. So first, let's hide our planet. Select it, press H on the keyboard to hide it. And we'll select the first object, which is rock 1. Let's reveal it. And I'm going to turn on the grid. So here's rock 1. And it's a low poly rock. And all these objects have been given a very quick automatic UV unwrap. Nothing special. And if you take a look at the rock, you can see that it's slightly sitting below the ground plane. And the reason for that is that when we place the object onto the planet, it's less likely to have this floating effect that is balancing on one of these polygons. Right, so here's rock 1. We also have rock 2. We have this twisted tree from the Twisted Tree tutorial. We have a second tree, and then we have a cloud. The cloud is sitting on the origin, which is fine. We'll move it later. Or actually, I can show you a trick later as well to put it slightly above the planet. So that's cloud 1. And then we have cloud 2. There we go. Now, let's reveal rock 1 again and create our mesh network. First, let's move all these objects actually out of the middle of the area, because that's where the planet will be. So select your group, not the rock, but the group. And we're going to move it just in one of these directions out over here somewhere. All right, now select your rock again, and we're going to create a mesh network. Go to your mesh shelf, choose this first icon, And what Maya will do will, actually it'll do a few things, so let me explain. First, it'll hide your original object, so make it invisible. It'll give you a Mesh 1 repro mesh. Are these objects over here. And these are actually instances of our original object. And then it'll also create a Mesh 1 object. And this is the one we'll interact with. So let's open up the attribute editor. And over here, we're looking for a Mesh 1 distribute input. So this node over here. And we can change the number of points from here. So right now, those points represents the instances of our object. So if I increase this, we have more. And if I decrease it, we have less. What we're going to do actually is drag the slider all the way down to 0 because we don't need any of them. All right, let's reveal our planet again. So here's our planet, and I'm just going to hide the grid. So here's our planet, and we'll select the Mesh 1 object again, and we need to create a placer node if we want to add objects onto here. So go to your first input, which is the Mesh 1, and here you'll find your collection of nodes that you can create. We're going to find something called the placer node and click Add Placer Node. All right, so now we have the Add Placer node over here. Sorry, the Mesh 1 placer node. And then all we need to do is click this Add button, and then we can brush on some rocks over here. We're going to have some issues though, so I'll take you through some of the issues that we'll have. So let me do this, do this. You can see that when I'm using this brush to add the rocks, it's in a very linear path. So I want to avoid that. I want it to have a bit of a scatter. So we have this option later on we'll toggle. Also, you'll notice that I accidentally, well, I did it on purpose, but I added this rock onto this one. We want to avoid that if we can. Finally, not finally, but we also have a couple of different rocks. So it'd be really nice if we can place both of those rocks on at the same time to create some variation. And if you look at the rocks, they're also all the same scale and the same rotation. So they're all rotated in the same way off the planet. And I would like to randomize that a little bit if I can. All right, so let's fix all those things. First, let's undo everything we did. And now the first thing we want to do is, depending on how many objects you have in your scene, and also as a best practice, we're going to drag our planet into this box here so that the only thing we can paint on or add objects onto will be the planet. That way we avoid adding objects on top of other objects. Right, so middle mouse, click your planet, hold down the middle mouse button, and we're going to drag our planet into here. All right, and next, let's add our second rock in. Go down here to the Mesh 1 repro tab, and then we'll middle mouse click rock 2 into here. So now we have at ID 0 rock 1 and at ID 1 rock 2. So that's something that you'll want to note, which IDs these rocks pertain to or your objects pertain to. All right, so let's go back now to the Mesh 1 placer node, and let's change some of these settings. So first, we're going to add scatter. So scatter will allow us to spread out those rocks a little bit when we use our brush. We also are going to change the setting over here, collide on create, from off to collide. This way, it helps keep the objects separated so they don't overlap. All right, and sometimes I'll use a strict method if it doesn't work, but collide usually works for me. Down here, we have a random scale. The scale of my rock is pretty good for me, but I want to reduce the lower scale. So I'm going to make maybe this one like 0.6 or 0.7, and I'll keep the top scale at 1. All right, and for the rotation, I'm going to give it 15-degree rotations, 15-degree rotation in the X, the Y, and the Z. And then down here, you can see that the fixed mode is set to fixed, and it's using the ID of 0. ID 0 is rock 1 over here. You can see it. We're going to change it from fixed to random. So now in this second box, we're going to go from an ID of 0 to 1. Once I put 1 in here and press enter, you'll see the second rock load in. There you go. And now all we need to do is click this add button. One more thing that you should be aware of is that you want to click this till it lights up, because sometimes, say I'm not clicking on anything, I'll go over here and I click on my Mesh 1 network, and then I go to my placer node, right? I have to click this sometimes twice till this lights up. There we go. Now all we need to do is click on our mesh. We should have everything set, and we'll have a much more variation in the rock placement. And if you take a look, we have a random scale, random rotation. It's kind of hard because it's a low poly rock to see. And it's spread out as well, and they're not colliding with each other. Also, they're not being placed on top of each other. If I try, right, it's not going to let me. Yeah. And if we want, we can lower the brush size and paint over here a little bit. I'm going to purposely add some rocks in the water, right? Pretend we added those in accidentally. And I'll add a few rocks over here as well. All right, so we have some rocks. I think that looks pretty good. Maybe I'll add a few more over here. All right, so let me take you through some of these other brushes. So we have a delete brush, and let's go to those rocks in the water over here, and we can use the delete brush to remove our selection or what we added on. We also have a collide brush. So the collide brush is pretty nice because if you have some rocks that you don't like maybe too close together, or it could be some objects that you want to have a bit more spacing, you can just use the collide brush to spread those apart, right? Overall, I think it's fine. Maybe over here I have a couple rocks, right? You can see that even though we had that collide on create, right, when we use the add brush, these are touching, right? So we can use the collide brush to just spread those apart a little bit. Right. I'll show you the ID brush in a second. We also have the nudge brush. This one's really nice. Say there's a rock and it's pretty close to the edge there. You can use the nudge brush to just nudge it in a direction. Right. There we go. That's fine. And so that's the nudge brush. And then here's the ID brush. This one's really cool. So the ID brush right now is using ID 0. And ID 0 for me is this lighter colored, larger rock. We can use the ID brush to actually change and swap out the mesh. So we can go to, say, this rock over here, which is ID 1, and we can click on it, and it'll change it to ID 2. Sorry, to ID 0. Now my brush is a little bit large, so it changed both of those, right? But I can, say, lower this brush a little bit, the brush size, click on this, and it'll swap that out. So that's very powerful. So if we wanted to change, say we had too many of these lighter colored rocks over here, and we just want to vary that up a little bit, we can change the slider by dragging or input a number, but I'm just going to use the slider to ID 1, which is the darker colored, smaller rock. And we just need to click on here, and that'll swap that out. So very cool. All right, so that's the ID brush. And then over here, you have some tools. These work by clicking on it, and you need to actually find your mesh point. So you have to like do a box select, and then you'll be able to use these just like the transform tools. We may use those later, but it's very simple. All right, so we have our rocks. Let's add some trees into here. So we added one rock, and then we added a second rock and created our network. Let me show you that you can add both objects into the network at the same time. We'll go first to our tree, and I'm going to unhide it. So here's our tree, and let's unhide the second tree as well. So we have both trees over here. I'm going to box select both of these trees, and then let's click on our create mesh network. And there we go, we have two trees, and over here is our tree. Let's go to our mesh 1 distribute node, and we'll drag the slider down to 0. We don't need to see any of those points. And now we need to create our placer node. So over here, go to mesh 2, placer, add placer node. And the first thing we need to do is add our planet into here. So middle mouse click your planet, add it into here. And if we actually go down to here to the mesh 2 repro, you can actually see both trees are in here. Also, this is backwards, so you can see that it's put tree 1 into ID 1 and tree 2 into ID 0. If you want to swap this, just what you can do is just click on it and just move it up, and it should swap those. All right. You don't have to, but I just did for mine. And I'll go back to the placer node now, and let's change some of these settings. So we'll scatter it, change the collide on create to collide, And then for the scale for the tree, I'm probably going to go somewhere between maybe 0.8 to 1.3. And then for the rotation, I don't want to rotate in the X or the Z, but I will give it maybe a 15-degree rotation in the Y. And then down here, we need to make sure that we're using both trees. So let's change it from fixed to random. And we want to go from ID 0 to 1. Or sorry, yeah, ID 0 to 1. There we go. And now both trees are in here. Awesome. We can click our add brush now. And let's find an area and start painting our trees, or planting our trees, whatever you want to call it. Right. Here you go. You can see this one's pretty close to the edge. This one's touching this one. So we'll use our brush to fix those. Awesome. And maybe a few trees over here. All right, so let's inspect our area. So maybe a few over here as well. So this area is fine. There's a lonely tree over here. That's fine. Over here, though, I have this tree, right? And so I can try and nudge it this way using the nudge brush. And the nudge brush looks like it's pretty big. I'm just going to do that. And I'm going to reduce the size and maybe just try and nudge this one tree or a couple trees. That looks better. And where is that lonely tree? Maybe I'll nudge this one back this way. And overall, I think that's pretty good for the trees. You can dress your planet how you like, but for me, that's good. All right, so now let's work with the clouds. So the clouds are, we can create a new network or we can add it into one of these existing networks. So let's do that. We'll work with network 2, which is this one that we already have selected. And we'll go down to the Mesh 2 repro. And let's add our clouds into here. I'm just trying to figure out if, oh yeah, we had that area over here. Let's fix this, these two trees that are touching. I knew I forgot something. We'll use the Collide brush. There we go. And let's check the other trees. Maybe create a bit more space over here. There we go. That looks a lot better. All right, now let's go back to the Mesh 2 repro, and what did I say? We'll add our clouds. So middle mouse cloud 1 into here. And if you scroll down, you'll have at ID 2 cloud 1, and then we'll middle mouse cloud 2 into here. And then if you scroll down, you should have at ID 3 cloud 2. So now let's go back to our placer node, and we'll click the add brush for a second. If you look down here, it's using ID 0 to 1. We don't want that anymore. We're using ID 2 to 3 now. And then you can see now we have cloud 1 and cloud 2 in here. Now for the clouds, I don't mind a bit of scatter. However, I don't mind it colliding with each other for the clouds. So I'm going to turn this off. And then for the rotation for the clouds, maybe I'll give it a bit of rotation, maybe 5 degrees in the X, 5 degrees in the Z, and then maybe only 10 degrees in the Y. Just change it up a little bit. And I think everything else is good. If we click the add brush right now, it's actually going to add the clouds onto the planet, right? I don't really want that. So I mentioned I'd show you a trick later. Now, one way to do that is actually, let me just add a cloud onto here. We could use this move tool, grab that mesh point, and then move it somewhere off the planet. I'm just gonna undo that though. Or I'll show you another trick. So let's create a sphere that will act as a cage for this planet, and we'll add the clouds onto that instead. So we'll go to our poly modeling shelf, and we'll click this sphere over here. And we can't really see, but if I turn on X-ray mode, you can see our sphere. And I'm going to scale this up pretty large, but somewhere above that tree line, right? So maybe even a bit more. So something like that is probably good for me. And let's turn off the, X-ray mode for a second. And because these points attach to this surface, I might even, I was gonna increase the subdivisions, but I think it'll be fine. All right, so we have that. Let's actually leave on X-ray so you can kind of see this happening. So here is our, kind of like our base mesh that we'll add the clouds onto. So let's go back to our Mesh 2 network, find our placer node, and we'll drag this mesh into here. So where did we add that? So down here is our sphere. We'll middle mouse click and drag it into here, and we'll just move this up above this other one for now. Now, if we click this add button a couple times till it lights up, we can add some clouds into here. For the brush radius, I'm going to decrease this a little bit though. And I don't want many clouds, so I'm going to just add a few over here. There we go. And maybe this area I'll leave it clear, and this one I'll add a few clouds over here as well. Right. So now let's go out of X-ray mode. We'll hide this sphere, and we'll take a look at these clouds and see if we need to space some of them. So over here, maybe I want to move this cloud a little bit. I don't mind it too much, but what we'll do is we'll go to our mesh network, go back to our placer, and we'll, I can probably use the delete brush actually, because maybe I don't want, oops, what did I do? So go to here, we'll click the delete brush till it lights up, and click on here. Let's see what's not deleting. Oh, there we go. Just had to drag it a little bit, right? So there's a few less clouds, that's better. And then over here, maybe we'll move this cloud. So I'll show you, this is where we'll use this move option. And you have to be careful not to grab the points you don't want to, but we may have to box select this, and this one I'll move just a little bit over here. There we go. Right, so now we have some clouds on our planet just like that. So that's pretty much how you use a mesh to start placing objects on here. There's a lot more to this, but it would take many tutorials to cover everything. So I'm just going to minimize this. And now our planet is set dressed. And I just want to mention one more thing. For a planet like this, it'd be nice to have one or two hero props to really have it stand out. But I'll leave that up to you and to see what you create for your own planet. Like, could be some type of boat or some type of structure on the land, right? Maybe less trees here and a structure. But yeah, here is our low poly planet that is now dressed with some props. All right, so our planet has all these objects on it now, but something to note is that they're still all instances. And so if we want to change it to a regular mesh, what we'll need to do is locate the repro meshes and delete the history of those. Otherwise, if we try and just delete the networks now, right, we're going to lose our objects. There you go. I'm going to undo that. But while they're still instances, it's actually pretty cool because you can still make changes to them. So let me show you. I'm going to reveal one of these objects, maybe tree 2. So here it is over here. And if I felt maybe the green trees were overall a little bit too small or large, I can take the original object and scale it, and they'll all scale along with it. Also, you can change the components. So I can go into one of the component modes, adjust it, and they'll change with it as well. So that's pretty convenient before we change it back to a regular mesh, because maybe you want to adjust the UVs, for example, and it's much easier to change the UVs on the original object, so with this one object, than it would be to change it on all of them. So I just wanted to mention that. But yeah, your planet should be ready for to be set dressed now. All right, so that wraps up another one for us. Hopefully you enjoyed this tutorial, and you can use the techniques to make some great looking low poly planets. That's it for this one, but we'll see you in the next. This has been Digital Dreambox, your destination for game art.